every management consultant on the planet talks about change, talks about disruption, talks about the chaos that we're living into. What do you see are some of the biggest challenges facing CEOs at this time?
Well, I think this world of the ever greater pace of change is nothing new. It's been that way for decades now. I mean, you can read business books from the 60s where they actually talked about the pace of change is starting to be greater and greater than it's ever been. So every generation, every decade, every year, literally, the pace of change is increasing.
That's similar to every generation saying, kids these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not like when I was a child, no respect for their elders, but that's every generation, right?
Oh, literally, Aristotle. You go back to some of the things Aristotle wrote about kids, and there's no respect for their elders, and it's been for millennia, literally.
So we have management consultants the last 50 years saying, this time right now is the most critical, we've never seen this much change.
Absolutely. But I think what is true now is that we're entering an era where the pervasiveness of that change is greater than it's ever been. So the places in your business that change are happening are broader and deeper than they've been in the past. So, in the 80s when email came in, just because you weren't the first business to embrace email as a way of speeding up your communication, didn't mean you didn't have time to catch up. Now what we're starting to see is that depth and width and depth, we'll say, around change. It means that whole segments of your business, whole industries literally start to change, and they change very, very quickly. And that's where you get into these disruptive forces. And I think disrupted industries, disrupted businesses are kind of an extreme end to that idea, where they've taken advantage of the speed of change as well as how quickly the whole industry can change. And so CEOs today need to be recognized that maybe they're not at that far extreme end, but they can be somewhere in the middle where things can happen so quickly that if they aren't prepared for those changes and starting to adapt to the change that's happening, they don't have time to catch up. One of the things that's helped CEOs buffer themselves from that sort of change is this communication chasm that existed between large industries, more conservative businesses and market segments, if you will. They didn't talk to the early adopters, the innovators, the people that were out there leading the charge in new things. What we're seeing now is they do talk. Now those early adopters, the innovators, aren't the gunslinging startups that they once were. Now they're cashed up. They have a lot of backing from large organizations, and large organizations are starting to pay attention to what they're doing. And so legacy systems, legacy environments, if you will, within businesses are almost a Trojan horse for new innovation, for new thinking to suddenly enter the marketplace. And you get the right sort of catalyst. Somebody ticks the right box, somebody elicits the right sort of response from a customer base, and all of a sudden you can see change sweep through very, very quickly. And probably the CEOs who are in industries that are, how shall I say it, the most traditionally entrenched are at the greatest risk, because through their entire life they haven't seen those industries change very much, and so their history becomes a little bit of a trap. This is the way it's always been done, so surely it's the way that it will be done into the future. And then all of a sudden those industries can change very, very quickly, and there's plenty of examples out there where industries that had been that way for decades changed so pervasively that suddenly they weren't anymore. So Kodak is the classic example. And I write about that a bit in the book and say, it wasn't that all of a sudden they were swept up by something they never saw coming. The reality is that Kodak invented the digital camera. They were tracking digital technology and its uptake within the photographic and videography market. So they knew that it was there. They owned a online photo sharing site, so they knew the power of the internet as a way of sharing photos. Problem is they just tracked it. They didn't do anything with it. They weren't in a position to actually adapt their business model away from somebody that made paper and chemicals that supported the photo industry. They saw technology as a way to sell those products that they'd always sold.
Amazing.
That was it.
I know that story quite well. Yeah, so it's always a good reminder. So in that, what could Kodak have done differently?
Take action. So one of the fundamental things that they were doing well was to recognize that change that was coming. So they talked about it at a senior level, they tracked it from an analytics perspective, they created strategic plans around how to make big moves to try to respond to that change, as opposed to let's engage our people in shifting the way we think about our business. And let's do it consistently and persistently and move stepwise in a way that's at pace with that change that's coming at us. How do we start to respond to digital technologies and take advantage of some of the things that we have that are strengths for us? So we understand photography, we understand videography, we understand those marketplaces. We have retail channels, if you will, into those marketplaces. So how do we get our people starting to consistently and persistently move our business in that direction?